Thank you all for having me. My name is Jenna, and I am an Associate Environmental Services Specialist with the City of San Jose Environmental Services Department. I work on the Energy and Water Building Performance Ordinance here at the City of San Jose. So the Building Performance Ordinance was adopted in December 2018. It built on top of existing California Assembly Bill 802. The first compliance deadline was May 1st, 2019. To develop the ordinance and collect stakeholder feedback, the city convened a task force throughout 2018. Over 100 individuals and over 50 organizations were involved in this task force. Developing the Building Performance Ordinance, which we also call BPO, was partially made possible by a grant from the City Energy Project, a joint initiative between the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Institute for Market Transformation. The BPO helps meet some of the goals set out in Climate Smart San Jose, which is essentially the City of San Jose's climate action plan, as well as the city's pathway to carbon neutrality by 2030 goal. So the Building Performance Ordinance applies to city-owned buildings that are 15,000 square feet or more. It also applies to privately owned commercial and multifamily buildings that are 20,000 square feet or more. Presently, there are about 2,050 San Jose buildings needing to comply with the ordinance. And that number fluctuates year to year as some buildings get removed and some get added. The requirements for the ordinance is that annually by May 1st, buildings must submit 12 months of their previous calendar year's energy and water data to the city through the Environmental Protection Agency's free online tool known as Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And then they also have to pay an annual $150 invoice. So another part of the Building Performance Ordinance is a portion of it called Beyond Benchmarking. And Beyond Benchmarking began last year, and it builds on the annual benchmarking requirement, where in annual cohorts, building owners are now also required to demonstrate either satisfactory building energy and water efficiency or undergo efficiency improvement projects as outlined in the ordinance. We are doing a phased rollout of Beyond Benchmarking in chunks of buildings from last year all the way through 2028. And our cohorts of buildings are based off of a building's gross floor area and the last digit of their assessor parcel number. So essentially what that means is not all 2,000 buildings are complying with Beyond Benchmarking in the same year. They're broken up into groups. And Beyond Benchmarking is different from the annual benchmarking requirement, and that it is an every 5-year requirement for buildings. So expanding on what Beyond Benchmarking is, if an owner shows that they're meeting the ordinance outlined performance standards for energy or water, then they go down what we call the performance pathway. If they're not able to meet these standards for either energy or water, then they go down what we call the improvement pathway. And using and hiring a qualified licensed professional is necessary for both of these pathways. And energy and water are treated separately. So for example, a building might meet the performance pathway for energy, but have to do the improvement pathway for water, or vice versa. So the performance pathway energy standards as written in the ordinance. One way a building can comply for the performance pathway is if they are new and have been occupied for less than 5 years from their first beyond benchmarking due date. Another way they can comply is they hold a LEED existing buildings operations and maintenance V4 certification. And then additionally, they can comply with the performance pathway by achieving at least one of the following for at least 2 of the 3 years preceding their beyond benchmarking due date. So they could have an Energy Star score of 75 or greater, have improved their Energy Star score by 15 points or more relative to their baseline year. And baseline year is the first year they submitted a compliant annual benchmarking report, or their most recent beyond benchmarking submittal. And then additionally, other ways are has a weather normalized site energy use intensity that is 25% below the calculated mean for that property type, or has reduced its EUI by at least 15% relative to its baseline year. Now going over the water standards for the performance pathway. Once again, if the building is new and has been occupied for less than 5 years from its first compliance due date, it will qualify for the performance pathway. And then additionally, if they have achieved at least one of the following for at least 2 of the 3 calendar years preceding its beyond benchmarking due date, has received a US EPA water score of 75, has improved its US EPA water score by 15 points or more relative to its baseline year, has a water use intensity that is 25% below the locally calculated mean for that property type, or has reduced its water use intensity by at least 15% relative to its baseline year. So if the performance pathway is not met for either energy or water, then the building will go down the improvement pathway. And the building's options for an improvement pathway, are to conduct an audit of the building and building systems, perform retro commissioning, or adopt efficiency improvement measures. For the efficiency improvement measures, 2 are needed per energy or water. So if the building is doing the improvement pathway for energy, they would need to show 2 improvement measures for energy. And to read more about the different pathways for improvement pathway, I've linked the section of the ordinance here, so when the slides are sent out later, you can reference that. So how are things going? So like I mentioned, the first year of compliance was 2019. Here you'll see the annual benchmarking compliance rates and beyond benchmarking compliance rates. Obviously, beyond benchmarking did not start till 2023, so there are no compliance rates before then. We are currently in the 2024 compliance year, so we will see where we land this year. But it is really nice to see that we have gotten a steady increase in annual compliance rates over the years. And yeah, here's some resources linked for later on for you to reference. And I will also touch a bit on some lessons learned and recommendations from my time on the program so far. So coordinating with local utilities is definitely a great idea as you're developing the ordinance, getting on the same page about access to data and building owners or service providers getting access to data, because obviously being able to access the data is a big part of this, so that buildings can annually report and see where their building lands for different pathways. Having a good system in place to accept incoming submittals is very helpful. to make the review process more streamlined and efficient. And finding a good way to notify buildings is important. Last year, we played around more with mass email communications as opposed to simply snail mail. And we noticed that definitely helped our compliance rates, and there was much more interaction with the program by doing more mass email outreach as opposed to just snail mail. And yeah, there are definitely a chunk of buildings that have remained silent all of these years with the ordinance and have never complied. And we don't have emails for them. And sometimes finding good mailing addresses can be difficult for buildings, mailing addresses that don't bounce back to us. So that's a challenge. And then in terms of staffing, for a program of our size, which is, around 2,000 buildings, I would say at least 2 full-time staff is ideal to run this program. And yeah, in terms of the development of the ordinance, getting stakeholder support from environmental advocates, the San Francisco Bay Area Planning and Urban Research Association and others was definitely vital to passing it. And yeah, that's all I had. And I think we can do questions now, and I'll stop sharing.
Great, thank you, Jenna. That was really great to hear about the process and compliance aspects. So yeah, due to a time constraint for Jenna, she'll have her own Q&A session. Please continue to direct any questions to the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll get started with Q&A. Adam, if you want to take us away.
Thanks, Ryan. And thanks for the presentation, Jenna. We have a few questions that came in. The first one is about the $150 annual fee the annual fee and what it covers, and how does San Jose pay for the rest of the cost?
Yeah, so yeah, the 150 is there to fund the program. And then the rest is covered by the general fund.
Awesome. And then more broadly, just how is the building performance ordinance enforced?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I mean, written in the ordinance, we do have the ability to issue non-compliance fines. We have never done so, and we don't plan to anytime soon. That is not necessarily a decision I have control over, and also comes down to, yes, resources and staffing. I think, yeah, enforcement is definitely, you would need the staff and resources to back that up. And I think it's a common sentiment across benchmarking and building performance policies that having enough staffing and resources is important. I know we struggle with that here in terms of, there's just enough to keep us busy and day-to-day implementation. So getting, more creative beyond that of super creative outreach or enforcement and all that, it's hard to do with the staffing and resources. So if you really wanted to go that extra step, you'd have to back it up.
Thank you. And so kind of along the same lines of, well, on the stakeholder engagement, how long was that process before passing the ordinance?
Yeah. So yeah, I was not part of the team during that process, during that time, but luckily I found information on it before today. So it looks like the task force meetings were over February through July of 2018, so many months. And I think I linked in the slide presentation more information on the task force meetings. And I think they even have like the agendas and some of the material that was covered. But yeah, the whole process, it looks like beginning of 2017 is when the planning kind of started for the ordinance, and then February to July of 2018 were the task force meetings. And then November 2018, they went to city council, and then it was passed December 2018. And then the first year of implementation was 2019.
Okay. Robust engagement period. The next question has to do with the administrative lift around compliance and enforcement. Were those mechanisms already in place, or were they developed along with the ordinance?
Can you repeat that question?
So what is the administrative lift around compliance and enforcement for the building department? And were those mechanisms in place, or were they developed along with the ordinance?
I guess I'm like the staffing needed for.
Yeah, staffing. Some ordinances require, well, in our case, passing reach codes. Some of them don't require as much added, activities for the building department or other departments. So I'm wondering if there were were the mechanisms in place to basically pass the ordinance and run with it, or were there new processes developed to enforce and ensure compliance?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm super equipped to answer that question, because like I said, I wasn't around when it was all developed and passed. But if it's helpful, I guess, yeah, the departments involved, it's just the environmental services department. So my team, and then we do involve the finance department for the annual invoicing, and they're more involved in the making sure buildings pay that invoice. They send out the delinquent notices and all that. But there are no other departments involved besides the environmental services department and the finance department.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's more questions on that, I can, yeah, happy to follow up, or if you want to email, and then I can maybe connect you guys with someone that might know more about that.
Okay. Thank you.
And just a time check, we'll probably have time for one longer winded question or two quicker questions.
All right. Let's go with this one. What are the barriers around expanding this program to smaller buildings, including potentially single family homes? And is that feasible?
Yeah, I haven't heard any talk about single family homes. I don't know, maybe others would know if there's building performance ordinances for single family. I don't know if that's a common thing or not. Yeah, generally I've seen just like commercial and multifamily buildings. But yeah, in terms of expanding the gross floor, or reducing the gross floor area requirement, we haven't really talked about that at all. But I think, yeah, it would simply come down to just the common questions of, do we have the resources and staffing to back it up? Yeah, what kind of outreach does it make sense to reduce the square footage? Yeah, I know we're lower than the state. For example, the state Assembly Bill 802 is only 50,000 square feet and above, and they also only do energy benchmarking. But yeah.
Okay. One more short one, Ryan?
Sure. Yeah, then we'll move on.
All right. So for the mean energy water use intensities for a particular building type, are these calculated based on calculations across the state, or is this calculations based on San Jose specifically?
Yeah, it's San Jose specific. So, yeah, our system tracks the incoming reports, so we're able to calculate, that data based off of, buildings that submit.
Great. Thank you. I'll pass it back to
Awesome.
Ryan.
I think that is all the time for questions for Jenna that we have. Thank you so much, Jenna, for joining. I hope we got you out here before 11. So thank you for joining and being willing to speak today.